Hello, friends. Today I've got three high profile solved true crime cases for you, all of which have some truly disturbing twists. Before we start, just a reminder to hit the like and subscribe buttons and ding that notification bell. Also, don't forget to drop a comment saying where you're watching from or what you're doing while you're listening. In May 2021, a quiet suburban home in Athens, Greece became the scene of a nightmare. Police responding to an early morning call found 20-year-old Caroline Crouch lying lifeless on a bed. Her infant daughter was wailing beside her, and the family's puppy was found hanging by a leash from the rail of their stairs. Caroline's husband, 33-year-old Babis Anagnostopoulos, was discovered bound and gagged. He told officers that armed burglars had broken into their home, tied him up, and strangled his wife during a violent robbery. The shocking crime and the grieving husband's story gripped Greece and made headlines around the world. In the immediate aftermath, Anagnostopoulos painted a harrowing picture of the night's events. He claimed that a gang of masked intruders broke in around 4:30 that morning and tied him to a chair while demanding money. According to his initial statement, he had begged the burglars to spare their lives as Caroline, who was tied up in the attic bedroom with their 11-month-old daughter, screamed for help. The intruders, he said, showed no mercy, and they allegedly did terrible things to Caroline for an hour to force out the location of the family's cash and jewelry. Once she revealed where they were storing about 15,000 euros in cash and jewels, they eliminated Caroline and the puppy to send a message to Anagnostopoulos. His account of the home invasion was utterly chilling. Greek officials responded with unprecedented urgency. The Citizens Protection Minister called the crime a rare act of brutality that had shaken the nation. Within hours, the government posted a 300,000 euro reward for any information leading to the supposed robbers. This was an extremely unusual bounty in Greece, reserved only for the most heinous crimes. Multiple police units were assigned to the case, scouring security camera footage and local leads in hopes of tracking down the gang. As friends and neighbors rallied around Anagnostopoulos, a helicopter pilot by profession, he appeared devastated. He even delivered a tearful eulogy at Caroline's funeral while clutching their baby daughter in front of mourners. For over a month, he lived as the tragic widower, publicly lamenting that his child would grow up without her mother and urging police to catch the burglars who had invaded his home. Nearly 5 weeks into the investigation, with no trace of the gang in sight, digital forensics cracked the case wide open. Caroline had been wearing a smartwatch to bed, a device that silently recorded her heart rate and movements. When experts analyzed its data, they discovered a fatal clue. The watch showed that Caroline's heart had stopped well before 4:30 that morning. In fact, her vital signs flatlined earlier in the night, which meant she was slain before the time the intruders supposedly arrived. This was a glaring red flag. Investigators dug deeper. They retrieved data from Anagnostopoulos' own mobile phone and found that his device's activity didn't match his story. A fitness app on his phone recorded him moving around the house during the period he swore he was tied up and unconscious. Additionally, the home's security system yielded another damning piece of evidence. The memory card from the surveillance camera had been removed at 1:20 that morning. This was several hours before the husband said the burglars broke in. Inconsistencies like these turned the investigation on its head. The very technology that the couple had used in their daily lives had effectively become a silent witness to the crime. Faced with this new evidence, police realized with growing certainty that the horrific burglary was an elaborate cover-up. As one officer later put it, Anagnostopoulos had gone to extreme lengths to stage the scene, all to make it look convincing. The revelation was as stunning as it was disturbing. The grieving husband was now the prime suspect. On June 17, 2021, in a dramatic turn of events, police summoned Babis Anagnostopoulos for further questioning. They were armed with the incontrovertible data from Caroline's smartwatch and other devices. Officers had intentionally waited until after a memorial service on Alanissos, the island where Caroline grew up, to confront him. Just minutes before his arrest, Anagnostopoulos had been seen embracing Caroline's mother in a final show of faux sympathy. Under intense interrogation, it took only a few hours for the truth to come out. Presented with the evidence of his lies, Anagnostopoulos broke down and confessed to slaying his wife. The 33-year-old told investigators that he and Caroline had argued that night and claimed he killed her in a fit of rage during a moment of what he described as irrational anger. According to reports in Greek media, he said the fight escalated and he strangled Caroline with a pillow while their baby lay nearby. He then panicked and invented the robbery scenario to cover up what he had done. To make the scene believable, he staged the break-in meticulously. After killing Caroline, he smothered their dog and placed the crying baby next to her mother's body. He then tied his own hands and even used his nose to dial the police in a final macabre touch of theater. When Greek authorities announced the arrest of Caroline's husband, the public was stunned. The wheels of justice moved swiftly following the confession, and despite admitting he slew his wife, he didn't plead guilty. Instead, he claimed that this was a crime undertaken in the heat of an argument, and that it wasn't premeditated. In the ensuing trial, prosecutors presented a mountain of evidence painting the defendant as a sick puppy who had carefully planned his cover-up. Notably, because of the confession, it was never an issue whether he did it, but rather whether the entire thing was premeditated or not. They argued that his actions, before and after Caroline's death, showed clear intent and calculation, not a momentary loss of control. Caroline's diary entries, discovered hidden in a closet, were brought forward in court to illustrate the couple's troubled relationship. Excerpts from this secret diary revealed that she had planned to leave her husband and documented his violent behavior during their marriage. In May 2022, a Greek court unanimously found Anagnostopoulos guilty of Caroline's slaying, as well as the crime against the puppy. The court flatly rejected his plea that the killing was an act of passion done in the moment, concluding instead that the crime was deliberate. Disturbingly, forensic testing revealed that Caroline had been smothered while she slept. The court noted that this fact that contradicted the defendant's claims of a mutual altercation. This strongly suggested it had all been planned out long in advance. For his crimes, the court handed down the toughest sentence possible under Greek law: life in prison, plus an additional 11.5 years for his crimes against the puppy. The verdict was met with public relief and a sense that some justice had been achieved for Caroline Crouch. Anagnostopoulos attempted to appeal his conviction in 2023, with his lawyers arguing that the event wasn't premeditated. Unsurprisingly, this wasn't accepted by the court, which reaffirmed his life sentence plus the additional time. Hey everyone, it's Jimmy here, just taking a quick moment to promote my Patreon and the YouTube membership. You can support my insatiable desire for caffeine-related products for as little as $1 a month. Late on a warm spring evening in 2022, the quiet of an Austin home was shattered by gunfire. By the time the night was over, 25-year-old Anna Mariah Wilson, a rising star in competitive cycling, lay dead on a friend's bathroom floor. Her brutal slaying not only devastated the tight-knit cycling community, it also set in motion a tangled tale of jealousy, a frantic investigation, and a 43-day international manhunt. Mariah Wilson wasn't just a promising cyclist. She was already a standout in her sport, even seen as a potential future Olympian. At just 25, she had won several major off-road races and recently left her job to race full-time, marking her as one of the brightest new talents in American cycling. Wilson was originally from Vermont and had been a competitive skier before shifting her focus to bike racing. In May 2022, she traveled to Austin, Texas, to compete in the Gravel Locos race, a 150-mile gravel cycling event, and was among the favorites to win. She stayed with her friend Caitlin Cash while preparing for the competition. On the evening of May 11, 2022, Wilson met up with fellow cyclist Colin Strickland, himself a top gravel racer and an old flame, for a swim at an Austin pool followed by dinner. Unbeknownst to Wilson, this outing infuriated Strickland's girlfriend, 34-year-old Caitlin Armstrong, a local yoga instructor. Armstrong had been with Strickland for 3 years and reportedly viewed Wilson as a romantic rival. During a brief break in her relationship with Armstrong some months earlier, Strickland had a short fling with Wilson, and it left lingering tensions between the three. Armstrong's jealousy had been simmering for a while. She had allegedly warned Wilson to stay away from Strickland and even once said she wanted to kill her. Wilson's family later stressed that she wasn't in any romantic relationship at the time of her death, which, if true, made the perceived love triangle one-sided. As Strickland rode away after dropping Wilson off at Cash's apartment around 8:30, a neighbor's security camera recorded something unusual. There was a black Jeep driving past the house just 1 minute after Wilson had arrived. When Caitlin Cash returned home around 10, she found Mariah Wilson on the bathroom floor, bleeding heavily from multiple gunshot wounds. Wilson's high-end bike was later discovered outside, tossed in the bushes, perhaps an attempt by the shooter to stage a robbery gone wrong. Cash called 911 and tried to revive her friend, but Wilson had been shot 3 times, twice in the head and once through the heart, and she could not be saved. Police quickly determined that this was a targeted attack rather than a burglary. They recovered shell casings near Wilson's body and learned from Cash that Wilson's last companion that night had been Colin Strickland. Strickland was cooperative and appeared genuinely distraught over Wilson's death. While the police obviously initially viewed him with deep suspicion, this avenue of investigation was extremely short-lived. He was quickly ruled out as a suspect. Investigators later confirmed he was on the phone at the time of the shooting. Detectives noted a black Jeep Cherokee parked at Strickland's home that matched the vehicle seen in the surveillance footage. A check of the license plate revealed it was registered to Caitlin Armstrong, immediately elevating Armstrong as the prime suspect. Once Armstrong was identified, detectives dug deeper into the trio's history. Strickland confirmed that he and Wilson had a brief romantic involvement during his break from Armstrong, but he insisted that was long over and that he and Wilson were just friends. To police, however, it was clear this situation had already ignited Caitlin Armstrong's rage. A friend of Wilson's told investigators that Armstrong had sent Wilson hostile messages in the preceding months to stay away from Strickland. Another acquaintance recalled Armstrong saying she wanted to shoot Wilson after learning about their past fling. This individual had thought this was just idle talk, simple hyperbole that people use when they're extremely angry over a situation. The forensic evidence reinforced these suspicions against Armstrong. Footage of Armstrong's Jeep near the crime scene at the crucial time was a critical clue. In addition, Strickland had purchased a gun for Armstrong a few months earlier, and ballistics tests later showed that shell casings from the bathroom floor matched that weapon. On May 17th, about 1 week after the attack, authorities obtained a warrant for Armstrong's arrest. They believed that she had tracked Wilson's movements, possibly through a fitness app on her phone, and then shot her in a fit of rage. Police had already spoken with Armstrong briefly on May 12th, when they brought her in under the pretense of an unrelated misdemeanor warrant. During that interview, when detectives revealed that her Jeep had been seen near the scene of Wilson's killing, Armstrong abruptly ended the questioning. Due to the nature of the warrant, officers had no legal way to detain her, and Armstrong was released, at which point she promptly vanished. Armstrong wasted no time fleeing. On May 14, 2022, just 2 days after Wilson's death, she flew out of Austin and disappeared. Investigators soon discovered that she had sold her Jeep for about $12,000 in cash on May 13th, and then caught a flight to New York City. From Newark Airport on May 18th, Armstrong used her sister's passport to board a flight to Costa Rica. Her sister later told detectives she never gave Caitlin permission to take that passport, and after further investigation, they came to believe it had indeed been stolen. U.S. Marshals and Texas detectives eventually tracked Armstrong to Costa Rica. They received numerous tips about where she may be living, including one then unverified claim that she was living in the remote beach town of Santa Teresa. This tip, the authorities would eventually find out, would turn out to be true. But for the time being, they were flooded with seemingly legitimate tips and couldn't investigate them all. There, living under the alias Ari, Armstrong had been hiding in plain sight among yogis and surfers at a hostel, teaching yoga classes and blending in with other travelers. She kept a low profile, telling new acquaintances that she had just gone through a bad breakup, a plausible story that raised no alarm in the laid-back Santa Teresa community. She had cut and dyed her hair, and even undergone cosmetic surgery on her nose to disguise her appearance. As the weeks passed with no sign of her returning home, the marshals devised a creative plan to flush her out. They posted a fake job ad online for a yoga instructor in Santa Teresa and got a lucky break when Armstrong, using her alias, responded to the inquiry, unwittingly revealing her location. Armed with this clue, authorities coordinated with Costa Rican law enforcement to surveil a local hostel. On June 29, 2022, after 43 days on the run, Caitlin Armstrong was captured by Costa Rican police at a hostel in Santa Teresa. She had altered her looks, but it wasn't enough. A search of her belongings turned up her sister's passport and a plastic surgery receipt, confirming her identity beyond doubt. Armstrong's international flight from justice had finally come to an end. Armstrong was quickly deported back to the United States and charged with Mariah Wilson's slaying. Held in a Texas jail on a very hefty $3.5 million bond due to her escape, she pleaded not guilty to the charges. In October 2023, while awaiting trial, Armstrong even attempted a daring escape during a medical appointment. She slipped out of her handcuffs and bolted away from officers, but was quickly tackled and recaptured within minutes, earning her an additional felony charge. Likely more problematic than this additional charge is that this evidence of the further escape attempt would be put before a jury as well. In November 2023, after a 2-week trial, a Travis County jury took only a few hours to find Caitlin Armstrong guilty. The following day, she was sentenced to 90 years in prison. Wilson's family, while grateful that justice was served, spoke of their profound grief. Her mother tearfully and poetically told Armstrong that by shooting Mariah in the heart, she had also pierced the hearts of everyone who loved her. Her father noted that although justice had been done, it was an outcome where everyone involved lost everything, and nobody really won. The 35-year-old Armstrong won't be eligible for parole for 30 years, meaning she'll be in her mid-60s before she can even seek release. In December 1990, just 4 years after the shocking death of basketball star Len Bias, tragedy struck the Bias family a second time. Len's younger brother, 20-year-old Jay Bias, was fatally shot in broad daylight outside a shopping mall, an act police would later describe as utterly senseless. This devastating attack unfolded at Prince George's Plaza in Hyattsville, Maryland, and it eerily culminated at the very same hospital where Len Bias had been pronounced dead. The story of Jay's slaying is a heartbreaking tale of a promising young man lost to completely senseless violence and the relentless pursuit of justice that followed. The Bias family had already endured a highly publicized tragedy before Jay's death. Jay's older brother was Len Bias, an All-American forward at the University of Maryland, and a top NBA draft pick in 1986. Len Bias's celebrated future with the Boston Celtics was cut short when he died of an overdose, just 2 days after being drafted, shocking the sports world. His death at age 22 made national headlines and even prompted new federal anti-drug legislation as the nation grappled with the loss of the young star. Jay Bias grew up in the shadow of Len's legacy. He was also a talented basketball player in high school, though he never achieved the same fame. By 1990, Jay was working an ordinary job as a bank mailroom clerk and trying to move forward, even as his family dealt with their grief over the loss of Len. No one could have imagined that the Bias family would soon face yet another incomprehensible loss. On the afternoon of December 4th, 1990, Jay Bias's routine errand to a shopping mall turned deadly. Jay was on his lunch break and stopped at a jewelry store inside Prince George's Plaza to pick up a ring. There, by chance, he crossed paths with 24-year-old Jerry Samuel Tyler, a man whose wife happened to work at the same jewelry shop. According to witness accounts, what began as a brief friendly exchange between Jay and Tyler's wife quickly provoked Tyler's ire. Tyler accused Jay of flirting with his wife and began a heated argument inside the store. Jay tried to defuse the situation and even declined Tyler's challenge to step outside and fight it out. Instead, Jay finished his purchase and left the store with a female friend, attempting to walk away from the confrontation. Moments later, as Jay and his friend got into a Toyota 4Runner with two of Jay's co-workers, Tyler lay in wait. Tyler and an associate, 20-year-old Gerald Wynn Island, had gotten into a light green Mercedes-Benz and followed Jay into the parking lot. As the Toyota began to pull out, the Mercedes approached from behind. In a burst of violence, gunfire erupted from the Mercedes. Witnesses said Tyler, seated in the front passenger seat, leaned across the driver and opened fire with a semi-automatic out the driver's side window. 8 shots were fired in rapid succession, and Jay Bias was struck twice in the back. One of Jay's friends in the car later recalled in shock that it seemed like the shooter was never going to stop firing. The ambush was over within seconds, and the green Mercedes sped away, leaving Jay gravely wounded. Bystanders and Jay's friends rushed to help, but the injuries were catastrophic. Paramedics quickly arrived and transported Jay Bias to Leland Memorial Hospital in Riverdale, Maryland. This was the same emergency room where his brother Len had been pronounced dead 4 years earlier. Despite medical efforts, Jay was pronounced dead from his wounds roughly an hour and a half after the shooting. The killing of Jay Bias set off a massive police response and intense media coverage, given the high-profile connection to Len Bias. Investigators at the scene gathered eyewitness accounts that quickly pointed to the suspects in their getaway car. Several of Jay's companions and bystanders had gotten a clear look at the green Mercedes and its occupants. Within hours, Prince George's County Police identified Jerry Tyler as the prime suspect in the shooting. Rather than flee, Tyler chose a different path. That same evening, roughly 7 hours after the shooting, he turned himself in at a police station, accompanied by his mother. Tyler was promptly charged in Jay's death and booked into custody, where he would remain behind bars from that night forward. Meanwhile, police also sought Gerald Island, the alleged driver of the Mercedes, as an accomplice. Initially, Island remained at large in the immediate aftermath, but within days he was arrested and brought into the case as a co-defendant. Both men faced a slate of charges for what authorities dubbed an utterly senseless killing over a perceived slight. In Temple Hills, Maryland, More than 3,500 mourners gathered a few days later for Jay's funeral, filing through the church to pay respects. From the outset, police and prosecutors were confident they had the right suspects in custody, but the road to justice in Jay Bias's case would prove long and convoluted. Investigators learned that the deadly encounter stemmed from a chance meeting and a burst of temper. Jerry Tyler, the accused gunman, had gone to the mall that day, reportedly in a foul mood, intending to confront his wife, who worked at the jewelry store. When Tyler saw Jay chatting with her pleasantly, Tyler's jealousy and anger exploded, assuming that his wife was flirting with Jay. What Tyler didn't know was that Jay and his wife were actually old high school classmates, and they were just casually catching up with one another. This misunderstanding on the part of Jerry Tyler would lead to an event that would shatter numerous lives that day, including his own. Tyler freaked out and challenged Jay to a fight, to which Jay politely declined. Jay, by all accounts, did nothing to escalate the conflict, and he even tried to avoid a fight by walking away. But Tyler fetched a weapon and enlisted his friend Gerald Island to drive after Jay, turning a petty argument into a deadly ambush. Police recovered evidence and witness statements that placed Tyler and Island at the scene and identified Tyler as the one who fired the fatal shots. Within months, prosecutors in Prince George's County assembled a detailed case, and by the spring of 1991, the matter was headed to trial. The trial of Tyler and Island began in April 1991, less than 5 months after the tragic slaying. The state's evidence painted a vivid picture of the crime. Multiple eyewitnesses, including Jay's 2 friends in the Toyota, identified Tyler as the shooter. Ballistics matched his weapon to the shell casings found at the scene, and the pattern of bullet strikes was consistent with shots fired from the Mercedes. Prosecutors argued that Island wasn't an innocent bystander, but an accomplice who willfully aided Tyler. They claimed he drove the car and positioned it for Tyler to shoot, fully aware of what was about to happen. Under Maryland's accomplice liability law, Island could be found just as guilty as the shooter if the jury believed he knowingly participated in the deadly plan. Tyler and Island, the 2 friends who had participated in this act together, turned on one another at the trial. Tyler's defense team claimed that it was Island, not Tyler, who actually pulled the trigger, asserting that Tyler was being scapegoated by his friend. Island's attorneys, on the other hand, admitted that he drove the vehicle to the confrontation, but claimed he knew nothing about Tyler's plan or any weapon. Essentially, each man tried to pin the blame entirely on the other, creating a classic case of conflicting defenses. Despite this finger-pointing, the weight of evidence against Tyler was extremely strong. After a 3-day trial, the jury returned guilty verdicts for both men in April 1991. In the weeks that followed, Island was sentenced to 30 years in prison for his part in the crime, while Tyler, as the trigger man, faced the possibility of life in prison. And I have to say it here, I don't see how the prosecution proved that Island knew what was going to happen beyond a reasonable doubt, but we'll get to that in a moment. What seemed like the end of the legal saga in 1991 was only the beginning. Over the next several years, the case became mired in appeals and retrials that tested everyone's patience. In 1992, Maryland's Court of Special Appeals overturned the initial convictions on technical grounds, ruling that the first trial had been flawed. One major issue was that prosecutors had improperly excluded several potential jurors solely because they were women, a practice the appellate court deemed unlawful. As a result, Tyler's 1991 conviction was vacated, necessitating a retrial. Gerald Island's conviction was also overturned on appeal, meaning he too would be retried. Unlike Tyler, however, Island ultimately walked free. At his second trial, he was acquitted. the jury finding insufficient proof that he knowingly aided in the shooting. After Island's acquittal, the alleged driver could not be tried again, leaving Jerry Tyler solely in the crosshairs of justice for Jay Bias's death. And personally, looking at the evidence, I think acquitting Island was the right decision. The only evidence they had that Island was an active participant was from Tyler himself, and he proposed the absurd theory that Island was actually the shooter. This contradicts the evidence of the witnesses who actually saw Tyler doing the shooting. Jerry Tyler was tried a second time in 1994. By then, he had remained incarcerated, awaiting his fate while the appeals played out. The 1994 trial resulted in Tyler being convicted again, seemingly confirming the outcome of the first jury. But Tyler's legal battles didn't end there. In 1996, Maryland's highest court reviewed the case and overturned the 1994 conviction as well. The Court of Appeals found that the trial judge had allowed jurors to hear prior testimony from Gerald Island, testimony given in the 1991 trial. This was problematic as Island had refused to take the stand in the 1994 trial. Using Island's earlier statements without giving Tyler the chance to cross-examine him was deemed a violation of Tyler's rights, so the conviction was tossed. And I have to say here that I have absolutely no idea how the judge allowed this into evidence, despite Island refusing to testify. This meant that, incredibly, Jerry Tyler would face a third trial for the same attack. Finally, in November 1997, nearly 7 years after Jay Bias was killed, Prince George's County prosecutors brought Jerry Tyler to trial once more. They secured a guilty verdict for the third time. The jury in this third trial deliberated for over 6 hours, but ultimately agreed that the evidence proved Tyler was the shooter. At 32 years old, Tyler stood silently as the verdict was read, marking the end of a long cycle of convictions and appeals. Prosecutors expressed confidence that this conviction would finally stick, noting that Tyler had now received a fair trial. Indeed, the judge sentenced Jerry Tyler to life in prison for the brutal slaying of Jay Bias. Interestingly, Tyler had been offered a plea deal for a lesser charge before this third trial, but he refused, insisting on fighting the charges. If he had simply accepted the deal, he could have expected to be released in his late 30s at the earliest and his mid-40s at the latest. Instead, he has the rest of his life to consider the additional tragedy he inflicted upon the Bias family for no logical reason whatsoever.